on the history and geography of the Darfur region in Sudan. So as outlined by this map, Sudan is a western country in Africa. The Darfur region is on the western side of Sudan, outlined by West Darfur, North Darfur, Central Darfur, South Darfur, and East Darfur. The timeline of the crisis begins in 1805 when the British/Egyptian colonization of present-day Sudan outlines and establishes inequalities between the Arab North and the Black African South. And in 1955, the first Sudanese civil war erupts as Sudan gains independence from the British rule, which this conflict will last around 17 years. And in 1983, the Second Sudanese Civil War, after at least 2+ decades and 2.5 million dead, a comprehensive peace agreement is signed between the Sudanese government and South Sudan. And then in 2011, independence with an overwhelming majority of 98% of South Sudan votes to secede from Sudan. While it is largely seen as peaceful, there is still violence in the conflict. And in 2013, ongoing violence leads to the South Sudanese Civil War beginning in July of 2013, which leads to a famine in 2017. Between 2016 and 2018, two peace deals were brokered. And in 2021, South Sudan turns 10, and the UN warns of another full-scale conflict due to delayed peace process. Today, the country faces an uncertain future and severe humanitarian need. With the genocide starting in 2003, what led to the genocide was in the 80s, climate change, famine, and tension between the Arab and non-Arab Sudanese people perpetuate political instability. And in the 90s, a lack of response from the Sudanese government concerning the drought and internal conflict led to frustration of non-Arab Sudanese. So, on April 25th of 2003, the Sudanese Liberation Army and the Justice Equality Movement attack an airfield and destroy several Sudanese Air Force planes, which begins the start of the genocide. And then in May 5th of 2006, the Sudanese government and the SLA signed their first peace deal. And then in November 16th of 2006, the establishment of the African Union United Nations Mission in Darfur, UNIMID, is formed. Then later in July 12th of 2010, the ICC issues an arrest warrant for President al-Bashir. In July 14th of 2011, the Doha document for peace in Darfur was finalized and signed by the Sudanese government and the LJM. And then February 2015, the HRW reports mass rape and possible crimes against humanity in northern Darfur. This is marked as the longest genocide in human history, surpassing the Holocaust, which this genocide lasted from 2003 to 2020, but other historians say the genocide is still ongoing. As in this graph, it shows the deaths and total excess deaths, which are caused from the conflict. The excess deaths are marked as are secondary, so drought, famine, disease as caused from the conflict. As you can see in the first initial fighting from October to March of 2003 to 2004 is where most deaths happen, whereas the second ceasefire, a lot of the deaths begin to go down, and then when increased humanitarian response from the UN and other SARA and other FEMA corporations, the deaths are still marginalized, but the secondary and excess deaths begin to fall. The Darfur region is mostly an arid country with sand dunes and deserts with forests to the southwest. And that's it for my section, and on to Calvin.
Hey, my name is Calvin Lane, and I'm going to tell you the people that are part of the Darfur genocide. In the middle, you have President Omar Hassan al-Bashir, who is responsible for the deaths of millions of Darfurians. In addition, later on in the years, he got convicted of the war crimes and crimes against humanity and was charged later on in July 12, 2010. Then on the right, you see the Justice and Equality Movement and the Sudan Liberation Army, which are the rebellions against the Janjaweed. Moreover, they were established early in 2003 by a group of educated, politically experienced Darfurians. And on the left, there's the Janjaweed, which is a clan that was promoted by the Sudanese government to attack the non-Arabian Darfurians. There are a Sudanese militant group that operates in Sudan, but particularly in Darfur and eastern Chad. They are responsible for the ethnic cleansing in the Darfur region. Right here, you see the Janjaweed uniform, which is different from the Sudanese military uniform, to not be noticed by the Darfurians. The Janjaweed were wearing stripes on their shoulders. To the bottom right, you see the Janjaweed attacks, where they go to different villages to burn houses, rape women, and kill the mans that are non-Arabian. And finally, right here, this illustrates a Janjaweed on a horse shooting a non-Arabian department. And this is it for my segment. Now I'm going to give it out to De'Ara.
Hi, my name is De'Ara Lawrence, and I'm going to talk about some of the atrocities that have happened in Darfur. So ever since the bombing of the airport, the Sudanese government has instituted a bombing campaign as well as a campaign of burning down villages along with the help of the Janjaweed militia. So because of this, many of the Darfuri people have had to leave their homes, leading to a displacement of about 2.8 million Darfuri people. Along with this not being the only thing done to them, there's the burning of their homes, the looting of their resources, the polluting of their water resources, as well as something instituted mainly by the Janjaweed militia, mass rapings. From a report in a town in North Darfur, in October of 2015, there was a mass raping done by the Janjaweed that lasted 36 hours. And then a quote directly from a female refugee from Disa says, "I was sleeping when the attack on Disa started. I was taken away by the attackers. They were all in uniforms. They took dozens of other girls and made us walk for 3 hours. During the day we were beaten and they were telling us, 'You, the black woman, we will exterminate you. You have no God.' At night we were raped several times. The Arabs guarded us with arms and we were not given food for 3 days." So as you can see, these people have gone through a great deal of things that are affecting them for generations. And even the Sudanese government has begun instituting chemical warfare on these people. So these atrocities that have affected generations of Darfuris is still happening. And now I'm going to head it off to Bree.
Conflicts in Darfur, Sudan were first declared genocide in September of 2004 by U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell, as he voiced the Bush administration's opinion, saying the genocide had been committed and that the government of Sudan and the Janjaweed bore responsibility. However, the UN, the African Union, and the European Union all disagreed the genocide had occurred, and they all accused the Sudanese government and its allied militias of committing these crimes against humanity. So, in 2006, President Bush decided to call for the number of international troops in Darfur to be doubled. And after working and talking closely with the Sudanese government over the years, the U.S. formally revoked its economic sanctions on Sudan in 2017. These sanctions had been in place since 1997. This was largely in response to the Sudanese government's quote-unquote sustained positive actions in reducing hostilities in conflict areas, improving humanitarian access throughout Sudan, and addressing the threat of terrorism in cooperation with the U.S. So, a comprehensive peace agreement was signed in August of 2020 between the Transitional Government of Sudan and the SLMA, the Sudan Liberation Movement/Army, and the JEM, the Justice and Equality Movement, which stated that the two would join the transition to democracy in Sudan through peaceful means. However, there's a great irony there. As we know, the Darfur and its people have seen everything but peace. Targeted civilians with no intervention from the government, and West Darfur in particular has experienced several serious bouts of violence since the beginning of 2021. Hundreds of people have been killed and tens of thousands displaced. According to Human Rights Watch, neither Sudan's transitional government nor the current military rulers have meaningfully addressed the underlying causes of this violence in Darfur. They quote, "These failures have once again contributed to the escalation of violence and civilian harm. And at least 500,000 people remain in displacement camps in Darfur where conditions are difficult and malnourishment is common, 2 decades after initial events have broken out. For many among the displaced, there is no home to return to. Some have had their entire villages burned to the ground, and others say their homes are now occupied by Arab tribes. So, all in all, the wounds consequent of the Darfur genocide have only been bandaged over the last 20 years, and there is a serious need for help." My poster incorporates images of results of attacks. You see here where an entire village was burned down. At the top, there's a picture of assailants doing what assailants do. Sudan in the middle with Darfur on the map. Another result of an attack, and the military getting ready to attack. And here I have help spelled out and images of migrants and people at displacement camps.